Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by Mr. Xeon.
You know, the thing that I really want to talk about today in this video is how many bananas can you hold while you're playing this thing that we're about to talk about? That's a big question I got.
What big question have you got, John?
It's not so much of a question, it's more of a statement. I love playing in the palm of my hands.
That's marvelous. Okay, so if anyone's slightly confused because they've clicked on this video with their eyes closed and haven't seen the title or the thumbnail, today we're going to be talking about the Steam Deck, which is a new console that is going to be released by, if you can believe it, Valve. Which is, you know, Steam, Valve, that's where the connection comes from.
Not to be confused with the Sky Deck from Sonic Adventure. I know that there's a really big just problem with that online.
Are we not talking about the Sky Deck?
I don't believe so.
No, sorry, John, we should have clarified, yeah.
Oh, all my notes.
And you might be, there's probably people already raging down to the comments going, this isn't a Nintendo game. I just peeked my microphone up. And, you know, sort of, it's not a Nintendo system, and absolutely, but this is the first realistic competition that Nintendo has had that is fitting within the same space. Because handheld, you know, sort of, we had the PS Vita, and I suppose we've got phones, but, you know, the PS Vita is arse-old now, and the phones and, you know, tablets and things like that, they're targeting a very different market. The Switch is first and foremost a gaming system. I mean, it's not really anything else. You still can't get Netflix on it. And so I believe the Steam Deck is it's trying to encroach on that a little bit. And you know, there's a fanboy in me that says, oh, they've just copied the Nintendo Switch, how dare they? But the more rational side of my brain is saying, thank God Nintendo finally has some bloody competition.
Yeah, I really miss the PSP, because the PSP sold 80 million units, which is a lot, but that's how much the Switch was at a few months ago. And there are amazing games in that thing, like Monster Hunter and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, like a bunch of great games that you couldn't find on DS. And the technical difference between those two systems just encouraged such different libraries. And that was exciting. But now we just have this one system with nothing really competing with it. And that's like really limiting as someone who just wants to play a bunch of games. And the Steam Deck, it's not going to introduce new kinds of games, because it's basically Steam. It's just Steam on the go. So it's not quite the same as PSP versus DS, but it is something different technically in the portable space, and I really, really miss that.
Yeah, I suppose that it does, you know, it is going to be an interesting system in the fact that since there won't be necessarily exclusive games designed for it, and maybe there will be, maybe Steam will be working on some things, but I guess, you know, you could still play them on PC, but it won't feel like people will necessarily need to buy this system in order to enjoy games that, you know, if they already have a PC and they already have a Switch, well then you should be fine. You won't need this unless you want to play them on the go, I suppose.
I must admit, there is a part of me that's, I mean, we don't really know yet how it's going to perform. I mean, that's something that we're going to be touching on later on. You know, we've got the specs. I'm looking at the spec list here. And yeah, you know, sort of on, you know, in pure numbers, it is leaving the Switch in the dust. But the thing is, specs are never as straightforward as that, you know. You can look at, you know, sort of PCs from times of things like the N64, and they were trying to do 3D graphics, and they were succeeding, absolutely, but you needed dedicated hardware, you needed 3D accelerators to really get anything like that, anything comparable to the N64. And I think what it comes down to is the fact that the Switch is a dedicated gaming system. It doesn't have a huge operating system running in the background, whereas the Steam Deck, it literally runs Windows, and Windows, it's not a light operating system. It's extremely powerful, and it will blow the doors wide open for the things that people can do on the go, I suppose in a way the same as laptops. But even then, it is hugely demanding in comparison to the Switch's OS.
Just to throw in a quick correction, Steam Deck actually runs on SteamOS, so it's not Windows.
I'm gonna shut my mouth. I saw so many people...
You can install Windows on it.
Oh, okay. I saw so many people talking about Windows. I assumed that... Thank you for the correction, John. I'm I'm always pleased to be proved wrong when I'm wrong.
So stop writing your comments, commenters. We've corrected it already.
Stop it!
Stop it!
Stop it!
But the thing about SteamOS, though, is not every game is compatible. They have systems in place to make as many games compatible as possible, but just by default, not everything is gonna be. So maybe Steam Deck is gonna push SteamOS to have more compatibility just across the board. I mean, we mentioned the Skydeck earlier, and theoretically, you could play Sonic Adventure on this thing. And there's a bunch of games I want on the Switch, like a laundry list of games I want on the Switch, which are on Steam. So that kind of like, that fills the bill. You can play Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 on the go, Persona 4 Golden on the go, like there's a bunch of games you can play portably, which just probably aren't going to happen on the Switch.
Absolutely. The Steam Deck, it's going to be interesting because, a lot of us are having these, I don't want to say complaints about the Switch, but there's, the Switch has kind of created this problem for itself where everybody, we just want everything on the Switch, right? It's a never-ending battle, and maybe someday it'll happen, but it seems unlikely. And now with the Steam Deck, you realistically, from the sounds of it, you'll be able to play anything that is on Steam. So Chrono Trigger now. There's all these like reasons for someone who, even already still has a Switch that, they might want to go out and buy a Steam Deck now because you just have this bigger pool of games that you can pull from now.
Do you know what's funny? This is a pretty powerful handheld, and so far our examples have been Sonic Adventure and Chrono Trigger. That just kind of shows our priorities. Like, in videos, they've shown this running Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Control, so it can run pretty beefy games. But if I were to get my hands on this thing, like, this would be a legacy machine. I wouldn't really want to play modern stuff on this. I'd go back and play a huge backlog of stuff.
Yeah, I'm only speaking for myself, but so many of those kinds of games, like I would rather play those on a big TV so I can soak in the detail and actually appreciate them more. And I feel like you lose so much of that on a small screen. I suppose Breath of the Wild and games like that are sort of an argument. Plenty of those games can be played on the go, and I've done that, and it's a ton of fun still. But I guess, I don't know. Yeah, the legacy side of things just sounds more fun, more enticing. But
one thing I have just noticed, in fact, is something that's been an area of contention for some people is the screen of the Steam Deck. Some people are sort of not demanding, but some people are a bit disappointed that it's only 1280 by 800, which is technically 800p, but realistically is 720p because it actually has a 16 by 10 aspect ratio rather than a 16 by 9 ratio. Which means that in terms of usable space using the standard 16 by 9 ratio, the Switch OLED screen is actually larger than the Steam Deck's.
Interesting. I take no issue with that screen, to be honest. Like 720p
No.
or 800p, however you want to phrase it, that's fine. Like for this kind of screen size, that pixel density is absolutely fine. And battery life is also something to take into account. And they have, like, they've thrown some figures around. The bare minimum was 2 hours, which is pretty short, but you can get around 5 hours or 6 hours out of this, so that's better. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be a crazy battery performer, which makes sense given what it's packing.
And that's kind of how the original Switch, how long that lasted as well. Wasn't it kind of like a 3 to 6 depending on what you were playing?
Yeah, you could sometimes get more if you had the brightness, lower down and you were playing something like, something super low energy like Stardew Valley or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's actually, there's probably somebody going down to the comments now saying, actually, Stardew Valley is surprisingly intensive on the CPU or something, which is entirely possible, but, it's a simpler game. It's not Breath of the Wild in terms of obvious computational power, or I suppose requirements. And it's actually going to be interesting to see how these games perform because, John mentioned Control and another game that I've forgotten now.
Jedi Fallen Order.
Jedi Fallen Order, yeah. Those are two pretty beefy games, and one of them is technically on the Switch, but it's the cloud version. That doesn't count. It just flat out doesn't count when you're talking about performance. So it's going to be really interesting to actually see how these games perform. I've also just noticed, how, do you remember the Steam controller?
Oh, God,
yeah.
That was a weird old thing, wasn't it? I've just noticed that the thumbsticks of the Steam Deck are described as 2 times full-size analog sticks with capacitive touch. So essentially the system will know when you're touching the sticks, even if you don't move them.
Oh.
Yeah, and there's also touchpads just below the sticks, almost like a laptop touchpad, and that's going to make games that require the mouse a bit more playable.
Yeah, I just why are the thumbsticks touch sensitive? What application does that have?
Some developer
sure.
will design some exclusive game for the Steam Deck now that uses that feature specifically.
Oh, it's going to be like a Ken Senran Kagura type game, isn't it?
Oh no, God, no.
Dang it.
We've emphasized that this is quite a powerful machine. Like, the CPU it's almost the same as the one used in the Xbox Series S. So, like, comparing those two in power, this has more RAM than the Series S. The CPU is basically the same as the Series S. So, like, this is a pretty powerful thing to take on the go. It's like a generational leap over what the Switch can do, maybe even more than that. But the types of games is the big difference, though. Like, typically in the past, handhelds don't sell on their hardware. I think this might be an exception, but it's the games that sell them. And you buy a Switch for Nintendo games, and just for that reason, I don't think this is really going to impact the Switch. But I do think it's going to open a different market, though, in the handheld space. But I don't expect this to really eat Switch's lunch. But it'd be interesting to see how they both kind of coexist, though.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about is potentially how indies are going to how the system is going to affect indies, because right now we see a lot of indies are fairly, I feel like they're more affordable, they're cheaper to get sometimes on Steam, because, or even just through, you know, Humble Bundle and things like that, because you can find codes a lot cheaper, or just games go on sale more often, and currently, you know, I think there's an argument to be made for buying a game on Switch versus buying it on other places, because you're able to play it on your TV and you're able to play it on the go. And so now you're going to have a new outlet to be able to play all of those games. And on the plus side, obviously it's better if games are cheaper for the consumer. And it's better that, you know, all of these people are going to have these, or lots of people probably already have very large Steam libraries. Like I think I have like 50 or 100 games in mine, and I don't even know why. I don't even play games on my PC. I just have tons of them. And so, you know, the cool thing is, you know, lots of people might pick up a Steam Deck and then just have an instant library of games to play. But at the same time, you know, I'm curious how that's going to affect Switch indie sales. Just because I feel like a lot of developers are seeing lots of positive reception by releasing their games on Switch, and even sales. You know, they're selling more units on Switch versus anywhere else, and I think it's because of, I mean, A, there's tons of Switch units out there, but B, also just the flexibility of being able to play it on the go and on your TV. And now that the Steam Deck can do that as well, I'm just curious where that's going to leave indies on Switch.
It's interesting because is Steam Deck opening up a new market, or is this just an extension of the PC market? Like, are you going to get a Steam Deck if you aren't already invested in Steam?
That's a good point. I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those devices where, you know, sort of who specifically are they targeting? And I think the immediate thought, and I think, you know, I'd agree with this, is people who own PCs at the moment and want to be able to play those games on the go, which is fine. Unfortunately, I do sort of feel that maybe I've got a feeling it's going to be a little bit like the Steam machines. I don't know whether you guys remember those. It feels like a crazy long time ago. They had their followers, absolutely, and some people, you know, love the convenience of just being able to buy a unit and it just runs the games. Essentially, kind of, it was a Steam console, but the sales just didn't like reflect that. I seem to remember, and this could be wrong, but I seem to remember sales were estimated at about 500,000 units across all their models, which, you know, 500,000, it's a lot of gravy. You know, I couldn't fit that in my house. But at the same time, when you compare it to something like the Switch, where it's sold, you know, I think latest numbers are, is it 28 million, I want to say?
Well, the Switch is close to 90 million.
Okay, I'm probably thinking of like Animal Crossing or something. As soon as you said 90 million, I was just like, yeah, what the hell was I talking about?
Yeah, I mean, with Steam machines, you're selling PCs to people who have PCs, and I know people upgrade their computers all the time, but that felt like a misfire on who you're actually marketing at. Like, people who own PCs and build their own PCs probably aren't going to buy a Steam machine. Whereas the Steam Deck is something different, you know, like this is kind of the extension of laptops, but it's in a more convenient Switch-style ecosystem. So I definitely think this is a better idea, and it probably will perform quite well. I don't know what I'm expecting, though. I don't expect this to be a raging success, but I do think this is going to definitely pick up and have a nice cult following. What I'm really hoping for, though, is they keep refining these. Because personally, I wouldn't really want to take this out on like a plane or something, just because it's pretty bulky. You know?
It does look huge.
Like, Switch is this nice, sleek device that you can just sort of put in your bag and pop out. Whereas this, it comes out a lot and it's quite heavy. The Steam Deck is 669 grams, the Switch is 400 grams. It's quite a bit heavier, quite a bit bulkier, and I still think you can carry it around in your bag just fine, but it's not quite as elegant as the Switch.
One of the other things that is kind of like a bit of a doubt in the back of my mind is, and it may well be unfounded because, again, we haven't seen how this, how the system actually performs, and if it's got enough grunt, it can kind of overcome this. But I'm a little bit concerned that there's going to be sort of like a bit of a difficulty, because we've got games running on the Switch. We've got things like Doom Eternal running on the Switch, no problem. I mean, yes, it's 30 frames a second, but it's running on Switch, and it's incredibly smooth considering that it's essentially running on a phone. But the only reason that can be done is because the Switch is it's one ecosystem with one, sort of like one series of throughputs, buses and things like that. One series of CPUs, technically two if you want to get into real specifics with the new battery model. But even then, it's one system, and you can custom tailor a port specifically for that. And I don't see developers doing it for the Steam Deck. And if it's a runaway success, then maybe. But I don't see developers going out of their way to make a sort of a Steam Deck friendly version. And as I say, if it's got enough grunt, it can probably overcome that. But it's still a concern I have at the back of my mind.
Yeah, I'm curious how games are going to run. Like, I imagine they'll run just as they would on PC. So realistically, you should be able to just open up different graphic settings, right, and alter things. But you're absolutely right though. Like the Switch is. Developers are designing games to run on the Switch, and sometimes that doesn't work as well. Like in the case of Apex Legends, it's smooth. It's a smooth experience, but it's really hard to see anything. And so, so I'm curious. At the end of the day, like I think you're absolutely right. Like, how are games going to run as smoothly and as efficiently as we would hope because of the PC side of things? That these games are designed to be adjustable. Is it really going to work that easily? I don't know. Also, isn't this going to get hot? Like,
probably.
It's running some, sort of from the raw numbers alone. It's running some stuff that's, not like out of this world or anything, but even so, they're pretty decent components. And the power supply is a 45 watt USB-C power supply using power delivery. 45 watts is a lot of juice for a portable machine. And the battery is what, a 40 watt hour battery? Those are big numbers compared to the Switch, because the Switch, I believe... Okay, so I've just run the numbers, and the Switch power supply can actually do 39 watts, so that's quite a lot more. But I believe that is only used when docked in TV mode, which means that when it's plugged in normally, I think it's closer to 15 watts or 18 watts or something like that. So that gives you a rough idea of the difference in power. It's not as stark as I remembered, and the Steam Deck can indeed connect to a TV, and it may well be that the power supply only uses that higher rating when connected to a TV. But we don't know that. We don't know how this is going to work. So I'm just worried it's going to get hot and uncomfortable, and it's probably because I'm currently in quite a hot room with a cold pack on my lap, sweating the business.
They are selling a official Steam Deck dock down the line, but for now you can use any USB-C dock, so you can just sort of find a cheap one you want, and that'll work. which is actually kind of interesting, because if you wanted to, you can install Windows on this and dock it, and then you've basically got a $400 PC, and a pretty good one at that. One that you can take anywhere. So that's pretty appealing too. Like the fact that you can just pack up a computer and like go to a hotel or something and hook it up to their TV or whatever you want to do, and you've basically got a portable machine. That's a nice extension beyond just games.
Yeah, that honestly, it's just when they revealed this, it kind of caught my eye. Not because it was, a gaming machine, but because it was a portable computer that could also play Sonic Adventure. Not specifically, but I really like miniature PCs. And one of the things I would really like to be able to do is have a miniature PC that I can take with me when eventually I'm able to do things like events and stuff like that in order to capture footage with a capture card, because taking a laptop is fine, but it's just a bit of a faff, and so a smaller, more compact unit, once again, it's a piece of technology that's coming out, and I'm obsessing over one little feature that applies to almost no one.
Yeah. Well, where it may not thrive as a PC, though, is the storage, because by default, for $400, you get 64 gigabytes of... what's the type called?
It's eMMC, I believe. Yeah, which is essentially... It's not terrible, and I think it's what the Switch's internal storage is, but considering the size of games you're going to be having on this, things like Control or the Master Chief Collection, I don't think that's on Steam, but you can install Windows.
It is on Steam, actually.
Oh, I'll shut my mouth.
Portable Halo. That's another dream right there.
That's actually really appealing.
Yeah, but on the 64 gig model, there's just some games you wouldn't be able to install. Like, you couldn't install Microsoft Flight Simulator. That's more than 64 gigs.
Well, you can use microSD.
I was just about to get to that. Yeah, you can use microSD
Sorry,
cards.
John.
That's all right. But on a lot of modern games, though, a lot of them are designed for SSDs. So you've got to wonder, is that going to impact performance as well? And if you wanted to get better storage speeds as well, as these models go up in price and storage, the speed also goes up. So for the 512 gigabyte one, you're getting a really good storage device on there. But of course, that's $649, which is it's getting towards double the price of the default unit.
It's two Switches as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see Alex at an event. Hey, can I capture gameplay footage of this game? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Alex just pulls out his Steam Deck, plugs it in.
I think we can all sort of agree, though, with the Switch, that system thrives when games are made for it. Like, there's a lot of games on there which are on Switch because they can be. Like, things like Doom and Wolfenstein. I enjoyed them. They're technical feats, but they're definitely compromised. Like, you can't look at that and say, like, this is the definitive experience. Because they're, like, especially like Wolfenstein 2, it's quite a blurry game. It's cool that it's on there, but it's not what you buy a Switch for necessarily. Whereas this kind of opens that market up. Like, we don't have to have these sort of compromised lesser ports. You can just have the full fat experience on the go. That's not a slight against the Switch, because I think Switch thrives with like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey and games made specifically for it. But it's good that we'll be able to play those kind of more intensive games, like basically anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious how many people are going to be jumping into this, even if they already own a Switch. Like, for example, on my backlog is the Resident Evil Origins collection. I for PlayStation 4. Can I say that on this channel, or is that okay, or is that
that's forbidden? We can't say. Yeah, we can't.
No,
shoot, I'm so sorry.
Other systems don't exist except the Steam Deck.
Right.
It's the only
okay.
other system on the market.
So I have Resident Evil on PC. Let's just pretend I don't even know if that exists, but let's say I have that. And so I've been in debates about actually buying the Switch version now, because I kind of want to be able to play that on the go, because I find myself so often playing games in handheld mode instead of on a TV. And so now I'm in a pickle where I'm like, do I buy a Steam Deck to be able to play some of these nicer games on the go as well? But I mean, also because I want to play Sonic Adventure, and it'd be great to play Halo now that you bring that up. And just, there's so many classic games. But I don't really want to play Resident Evil 1, the remake, on my Switch, just because I already have a better version that I could be playing somewhere else, but that I don't have that handheld aspect with my other version. So yeah, so I'm curious how many people are going to be jumping into this, even if they already own a Switch, just because of the graphical and capabilities, and the fact that that it's more powerful.
There's
Yeah,
definitely going to be a subset of people who are exactly in that situation. And I think that is kind of who this machine is made for. And more power to them, absolutely. If you've got a big library of games, there's no sense in buying a Switch only to have to buy a load of other games, and not all of them comparable. And if you're not really interested in Nintendo first-party stuff, then this is definitely a much more sensible purchase. There is a part of me that is wondering, the people who are really into their PC gaming, are they going to be happy with the performance that this machine provides?
It's a good question. It feels unreasonable not to be, given what it is. But some people just want more, though.
It does, but I think some people want the absolute tip-top, the absolute best, 4K, 120 hertz and things like that, which, fine, go for that. But I don't think we're going to be seeing anything close to that on a portable machine for at least a year.
Yeah, I mean, when you dock this, you could play some games in 4K, like definitely some older ones. But, people, I say it's unreasonable, but a lot of people don't like what the Switch can accomplish. And, you look at that thing, take the Joy-Cons off. That's a tiny tablet. It makes sense what it can do when you think about what it actually is.
If anyone's doubting that, just Google an image. It is basically all battery and a tiny little circuit board. It's just phenomenal what they've managed to do with it.
Yeah, so you definitely have to take into account what these machines actually are. But the Steam Deck is a lot more powerful than what the Switch is, and you should expect something much grander out of that. So that's great. But the performances should still be more than enough, given the price, especially. Like $400 for a PC. Like, if you disregard the screen, disregard the size, disregard the form factor, $400 for these components, that's still pretty good.
It's not bad at all.
Even portable gaming PCs aren't a new thing, though. I mean, GPD Win has been around for years now, and there's different form factors of that thing. They aren't cheap, though. They're close to £1,000, whereas we're looking at over half the price with this thing. So this is entering a new market. This is something that people can definitely afford without having to go into a loan or something. But I don't think this is necessarily the Switch's market. Most Switch owners aren't people who care about tech. Most Switch owners are people who care about playing Animal Crossing. I don't think this is encroaching on that territory.
That's a very broad generalization, John Cartwright.
Well, it's a lot of them, I felt you look at the best-selling games on the Switch, they aren't the ones that push tech. They're the ones that push
Doom.
fun. They aren't Doom, right. So I do think your average consumer who owns a Switch probably isn't interested in this kind of stuff. Maybe they are. But I just feel like people who own, most people owning a Switch are those who want to play Pokemon and Mario and Zelda and so on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because, another example quick is Monster Hunter Stories 2 just launched on Steam and Switch, right? And so now if some people are going to have the option now to buy it on Steam versus Switch, and you're able to play it on Steam Deck portably. Which one do you choose? So I'm really curious to see how the market is affected. And you guys brought up a great point earlier as well, is that it's good to see that even if this doesn't necessarily affect Nintendo that much, I hope that it at least allows them to look at this and say, this is competition. We need to do some things to change things up, or to just to make ourselves better, because the Nintendo they just everybody needs a little bit of competition, right? And the other thing that's kind of cool too that I realized is we live in an era now where, if realistically, I think this is a game that would run it. But if you have a friend that has a Steam Deck, and let's say I have a Switch, right, and we both have Rocket League, we could play against each other online because of the cross-platform gaming.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's so cool to be able to see two handhelds of completely different breeds be able to link up in that regard.
Yeah.
And it's just like a crazy world we're living in right now. It's great.
I can see one problem in the near future with Nintendo, and I don't want to keep bringing this thing up, but Switch Pro, it's been rumored for so long. If that ever comes to form, it's probably not gonna be anywhere close to the Steam Deck, because it's a very different architecture, and I think the expectations for what Switch Pro can be probably won't come close to these specs. And the Steam Deck itself, it has compromises. It doesn't come with a dock for one, whereas the Switch comes with not only a dock, but Joy-Con, which are packed with quite expensive tech.
Mm-hmm.
So those concessions can't really be made with the Switch. So if the Pro ever comes along, it's probably going to be weaker. And that's going to be quite an interesting narrative to see people discuss.
I know we've sort of talked a lot about our sort of reservations about this machine, and I just want to make it absolutely clear. I really want this to do well. Like, I'm concerned because I'm worried it won't do well because, of little worries and things like that, because I'm a worrier. That's what I do. And I do want this to do well because at the end of the day, it's more gaming machines. More is always better. More competition. It forces everyone else to match and be better in order to, sort of stay ahead of the curve and things like that. It becomes a sort of a gaming arms race, if you like. And that will breed innovation, and Nintendo will maybe double down on their exclusives, their first-party exclusives. They start doing more, sort of more and better and shinier Mario games, and they produce a new series of games called Ridley that's all about, I don't know, I was hoping to go somewhere with that, but my brain fell apart. And, sort of that's only ever a good thing. And that's what I want. I don't want a Wii era Nintendo. I don't want complacency. I want them to be like they were at the start of the Switch, where they had all this drive and all this, sort of they had to fight against the stigma of the Wii U, and they had to overcome it, and they managed it, and they, absolutely knocked it out of the park with Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, all of these great games in the first year. I want to see more of that again.
And I think it's also worth noting, the Vita, when it started, it was off to a pretty good start. Like, Sony were supporting that thing quite a bit. We had an original Uncharted, we had a Gravity Rush, one of my favourite games from Sony in a long time. There's quite a few big first-party games, and then like Persona 4 Golden, and like good ports like Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. Like, there were some good games on that thing. It wasn't competing with the 3DS, though, was the problem. But Sony have really good manufacturing and distribution channels, which Valve don't. And the problem right now, facing a lot of pre-orders for Steam Deck, is many pre-orders have been delayed until Q4 2022. And that's quite a while away. So whether people can even get their hands on these things until over a year from now, that's up for worry, I suppose. And even after then, like, when can you actually buy this thing if pre-orders can't get them? That's another worry.
That's interesting that they're even taking pre-orders for that far out as well. You'd think that they would just pre-order the ones that they have and then do like another wave of pre-orders as well, like later on. That sounds, because that does kind of create more. That for me, if I was someone who was trying to actively get one right now, and I knew that if I pre-ordered one now and I wouldn't get it till like next year, I don't know, that just doesn't feel good. I guess it's nice to know that you have one on lock, but at the same time, having to wait that long for something that you want to buy right now, I don't know. I guess, but I also haven't been trying to buy a PS5 and Xbox Series X, so I don't even know what that's like right now.
It's a hard time for all tech right now.
Okay, well, there you go. That is 3 predominantly Switch owners and their perspective on the Steam Deck. And the strange intonation that I'm using. Let us know what you think of the Steam Deck. Do you think that it's going to be competition for Nintendo? Do you think it's going to be a flash in the pan? Do you think it's just not going to go anywhere? Or do you think it's going to leave Nintendo in the dust? Let us know with a comment down below, and thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you check to see whether that subscribe button is 16:9 or actually 16:10, and be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
Oh man, I love the new Xeon. He fits straight in my pocket.
Hey Tails, I think we need to make our way up to the Steam Deck.